I'm going to ask you a fairly heavy question here. So, from everything we've talked about on our shows, on my show, and that you've given to other interviews, so I don't think I'm talking out of school here. And you've also mentioned, that you were coming off the OxyContyn, or at least trying to at that time. I can't enjoy the match as much as I should, because I know you're suffering, I know you're sick, and you've said in a previous episode that you're going through, a divorce, and you're going through just a load of different things. So as I know you better than obviously, I suppose, most people watching this, it sort of breaks my heart a little bit knowing that you're going through all these different things, personal and physical issues at the time. Can you watch these matches at this time and not sort of have your mind taken back to how you're feeling at these?
No, it definitely does suck me back to that. As much as you try not to, like, it'll pop. Like last night, I didn't sit down and go, okay, this is that time frame, and put a bit of a up. But as I'm watching it, I can see by the shape that I'm not in. That's the first giveaway, and because there was so much, I think the fans know, how in love I am with my boys. That Caden had just. No, Cade wouldn't be born. He wouldn't be born until 2005. So Connor's young, and pretty much oblivious to this. And it was a stage in my life where if there's one person on the planet that I should have been able to count on, it would have been my spouse. And instead, I was getting threats. You'll never see your kid again and stuff like that, which only further pushed me into the shell. Like, I can't even talk to her about this. And so, you're getting it at work. You're getting it from home. Your son is oblivious to it. And, I still have enough of my wits about me to know that, like, I'm taking a amount of this OxyContyn that should be deadly. And each time you're throwing those pills in your mouth, it's basically playing Russian roulette. But you're stuck on it. You're hooked on it. And, through this time, and it's by no means saying like I deserve a medal for any of this or whatever. It's speaking the truth. There wasn't a time that I was, from the moment, like months into taking OxyContyn, that I was addicted to it, physically conditioned to it, and physically dependent would be the actual phrase. That I didn't want to put a gun barrel right behind the dose. It was, I was the guy that never did drugs in my life and never had any interest in it. I was, my friends and I could get enough laughs off just being stupid goofballs like we were. And I just was always terrified of doing those. There was a girl named Karen Ann Quinlan. This is around 71, 72, 16, 17, 18-year-old girl that went to a party, drank a beer, by all reports, drank a beer and took a pill. Lapsed into a coma for like 29 years before they took her off the life support. And I always thought, like, I'm not the guy that has the best luck. So if that's going to happen to somebody, it probably happened to me, which is, again, I had no propensity in my life to ever want to do any kind of drug. But when a doctor prescribes something to you, that's where my naivete came in, was like, okay, well, this is from a doctor. And
it's a miracle drug, wasn't it? They told you.
Miracle drug, quote, exactly from their documentation, Purdue Pharmaceuticals, the one that the Supreme Court here in America is soon to hear the case on. So I had tried through those 5 years dozens and dozens and dozens of times. I had gone through 5 what's called rapid opiate detoxes, which were $5,000 to $7,000 each. It wasn't like, hey, I'm just going to keep on, I'm having a great time here and this is going to have some jollies here. But I was also scared to death, and not being able to talk at work about it, not being able to talk at home about it. I've got a small child at home that's witnessing this, although oblivious to it, thank God, up to a point. That there's the weight of that, that slams you at times. Certainly not something I'm proud of, but like I said from day one, whenever I did the interview in TNA, if I don't talk about this, it will give off the connotation that I should be ashamed of this. And I was never ashamed of it. That's why I've talked about it publicly, because I now know, as I knew then without knowing. There are millions of people around the world that have endured the same thing, whether it's OxyContyn or something else. If I try to hide it and it leaks out, and it will certainly leak out at some point, the connotation should be, hey, if you have a problem out there, hide it, conceal it. Hey, dummy, don't tell anybody because bad things will happen to you. And I didn't want that to be the stigma. So I spoke publicly about it. And I think in a lot of ways cut the legs off the argument. You know, like if somebody comes and says, well, what about this or what about that? Okay. And I've spoken about that. And like now we'll openly answer those questions. But I do want to talk to people out there right now that are watching this episode that may know somebody, a loved one, a friend, a spouse, a child, or a friend that's going through something like this. Get them help. Let them talk about it, because it really is the crux point. Concealing it and making threats to that person, you'll just make them better liars is all you'll do until you get the phone call, hey, that person's gone. You know, so if you really love that person, you really care about that person, fight Satan and God above both on this thing if you have any attempt to save your loved one's life. But for me, what became therapeutic is talking about it. And, you know, that letting other people know, come up and say, and I think at the time I said, like, if there's one person that's out there right now that can be saved by this, or, you know, not make the mistakes that I've made. And over the years, I've probably had 2-3 dozen people come up and say, hey, just want to say thank you. I was going down the same path, and when I heard your story, and so like I can't ask anything better. That's the best payoff I ever got. So it's there are so many people. And I mean, just take a look around. It's the people say the opiate disaster in this country. It's worldwide. This stuff going on, and now the fentanyl that's being put in with it is even deadlier than that stuff was. And you know, as a parent, it scares you. And I've had these same conversations with my kids. I've talked openly with my kids as long as they've been old enough to understand what it is we're talking about, because this is as real a thing that that exists in the world today. Like when you, as a parent or as a loved one, you worry yourself over the what if. Say, what if the satellite falls on my kid's head or whatever? This stuff is real, and it's right there in my hometown, which I've told you before, sort of like Mayberry. I had a guy several years ago tell me, I can get heroin within 5 minutes of this place. And come on, seriously? He goes, 3 minutes that way, 2 minutes that way. You're talking bullshit, right? And you know, I'll look at some right now. Like, no, I'm not asking for it. I said, but it's that ubiquitous here in New Brighton, Pennsylvania. And yes, it's overrun. It's it really, really is a major, major thing that now, sadly, because of all these other stupid headlines, it's sort of been pushed to the back seat. Like, no, okay, well, everybody knows about that. We don't really have to keep talking about it. Yes, you do, because it's for me the fact that I could go public with it and I had an outlet to do that with was hugely helpful. But that was step one of 1,000 steps. And the next thing that was most helpful to me is I can't shut my brain off. And so like I was telling Chris the other day, you'd be dry, like in the middle of this conversation, we'd be doing an interview, and all of a sudden, for whatever reason, my brain would go, take an OxyContyn. You're okay. Take an OxyContyn. And it wouldn't stop. It wasn't like you could say, okay, well, what were we saying, James? It was that until you find one. Okay, screw it, just go take one.
How long did that last after you
minimum 6 months. Minimum 6 months. I took my last dose December 22nd, 2005, and put myself in the hospital in end of February, and for I would say into that fall, before I started getting a little better. Like it wasn't okay. 6 months and I'm back to perfect. You know, the whole time you're sort of bottoming it out, and you're getting a little bit better, and it took forever because my body was so inundated with that stuff. You know, your brain receptors and things, the endorphins, that your feel-good hormones, they have the same chemical shape as the opiates. So those opiates latch onto your brain receptors like a key into the keyhole. Once that's filled up, nothing else can get in there. And it takes the longer you take that stuff, it takes longer and longer to get off of it. And so for me, I was able to wrap myself in NA meetings, Narcotics Anonymous. And I'd stayed away from those places like the plague prior, fearful that if I would show up at one of these meetings, someone would go, "Hey, I was just at a meeting and Shane Douglas was there," and so it was like you felt like a rat in a corner, like there was nowhere you could turn to get anybody to go, "Hey, I understand this talk," and that in its own way was so confining. But when I came out of there, because I can't shut my brain off, I took myself around. They tell you to do 90 meetings in 90 days. I did 90 in 35 days because I literally drove all around Florida, meeting to meeting to meeting. And what that did was just chewed up my time. I didn't have free time to stop and think about that stuff. And since then, you'll hear people say, "Well, today, James, is my 30,000th day clean." I stopped thinking about that a long time ago because it just kept reminding me of it. Like I don't want to think about that, nor do I want to forget it. And I've said all the time, if I ever felt an urging to take that kind of garbage again, I'd immediately get to a meeting or go talk to somebody. But it's for the loved ones out there, I know it seems like such an impossible thing because you get this screw you don't know what you're talking about. You're going to get all kind of pushback. Take it and just keep going with a smile on your face and keep going, because if not, we know how that movie ends. And it is a very real thing. And I'm just thrilled to have been there. It struck me when my oldest son was in second grade. And we had moved back to Pittsburgh by then. Marriage is split up by now. And he went to performing arts school. So every holiday they would have a Easter thing, play. They'd have a Christmas play. And it was Christmas time. So his class in the second grade did Frosty the Snowman. And I noticed really quickly when he would come out on stage, because his mother would sit as far away from me as she could. When he came out on stage, he wouldn't look for her, he'd look for me. And so when he'd see him, give him like, "Hey, man, that's cool." And he came out on the stage, and during the Frosty the Snowman, he had this big white puff ski jacket on him. And he came out and he did this little dance at the front of the stage, and he backed in line. I looked at him and I went like that was fucking cool, dude. And this big smile went across his face. He was as proud as a peacock. And the next second, boom, the planet fell on my head. Because I thought, what would this boy be doing right now if I weren't here? And I shouldn't have been there. And the guilt of that was debilitating. But so now that's why I marvel so much at what my kids are doing. Connor and his music with Danda Veins. My son as the athlete is a much better athlete than I was at that age. I marvel at this. I watch these kids. I'm like, man, like every day you're here. I tell people every morning, they'll say, "Hey, open my eyes today. We're still above ground." So that's good. It's, and that's why, and not to sound corny, I'll wrap it with this. It's, after getting off that stuff, you go through that long, just miserable period. And then like one day you wake up and you go, somebody's cutting grass, or, "Hey, man, the sun's really bright this morning." Just these crazy things that you've paid zero attention to for years prior. And suddenly you start smelling the grass and the flowers and the sunrises and the sunsets. And I still find value in all of that stuff. I know it sounds corny for the franchise character, but I just, being alive is an incredible thing. And, having the opportunity to make tomorrow a better day for us than it was today, or better than, made the day after that better than tomorrow. That's what we get the chance to do when you're alive. Once you're in that hole, that's it, all said and done. So, enough said about that.